Hey forum, my name is Manny, aka CascadeScents. Welcome to another video. As you see by the title, this one is a tier list fragrance video, this time on Parfum de Marly. Now if you don't already know, Parfum de Marly is known for their casual, friendly, crowd-pleasing approach, which bridges designer taste with a higher quality typically associated with niche fragrances. Although I'm sure there are some of you who would like to dispute that level of quality. That being said, I don't discuss Marly that often on this channel, but I am more than familiar with a lot of their offerings. So that being said, I hope you folks enjoy this with me. But just so you know, I'll only be discussing the current masculine / unisex ones and not the discontinued ones here, and or the women's ones, just because I haven't really familiarized myself with that stuff. But yeah, we might as well get it cracking. We're gonna start off alphabetically backwards. So we have Shagia right here. And if you don't already know, Shagia is a more fresh and masculine oud. You know, with the addition of traditional notes like geranium, for example. And with that addition of geranium, that's what kind of makes it smell different than its predecessor in Cruel Intentions by Kilian. However, I can't really give it that much shit for smelling like a clone because, believe it or not, the same perfumer also did this one in Sedley Lanceur. Typically, she does some of my favorite Kilian offerings, although admittedly Cruel Intentions is not one. So I must say that Shagia is not remotely one of my favorite Parfum de Marly's either. But I must say that Cruel Intentions, the film, is one of my guilty pleasures of when I was probably too young to watch it. And sadly, I like the film more than I like any of these fragrances. But when it comes to do I like Shagia more than Cruel Intentions, it's kind of hard to say. The geranium addition just doesn't smell that flattering off of me personally, and I just think it comes off as a meh, middle of the road oud. So considering the fact that part of my merit for a brand like Parfum de Marly is a crowd-pleasing factor, and I just don't think this is it, and I'm not totally in love with the DNA, I think I'm going to leave Shagia at a D tier. Alright, moving on to the next fragrance, and that is Sedley now. And in retrospect, I've yet to be wowed by a Marly that is fresh for the most part. This stuff in Sedley utilizes Hivernal Neo, which is a lily of the valley kind of aroma chemical, although this stuff leans watery rather than more lily of the valley green-like, if you ask me. That being said, it does have a touch of green still, but it's not like it is overwhelming in the fact that maybe people who are apprehensive about green fragrances might not like this, because I think you will. But I also think that there's fresher fragrances even within Marly that you'll like furthermore than this, because barring that aroma chemical, I'm not really too fascinated by the rest of the scent. And of course, there's way better freshies outside of this brand, so I'm not really sure where to put Sedley. I guess I can put it in D as well. Next up, we have Percival by Mont Blanc. I'm sorry. No, it's not actually by Mont Blanc, but its inspiration is in Legend, if you've yet to smell that. Now, does it smell like a higher quality of Legend? I think its $200 price tag would definitely indicate that it is of higher quality, and I personally think it smells of higher quality as well. Do I think it's worth it at that evaluation? Honestly, I don't hate the evaluation. I wouldn't say it's completely worth it either. But again, I'm just trying to take my mind into the mind of a Marly consumer, in which the art might be secondary to you and you just want something high quality that smells good regardless of where it came from. Again, not really trying to reinvent the wheel, but rather redesign it in a way that is better. And since I think it accentuates the more crowd-pleasing elements of Legend in a way that I think most people will enjoy, I don't mind the scent. I think Percival gets a C tier. Moving on to Pegasus now by Dior. I'm joking. So yes, this one kind of has some resemblance to Hypnotic Poison by Christian Dior, although I'm not even sure if they actually meant to rip that fragrance with this one, and or doesn't smell that much like it, just because I feel like the metallic nature of Pegasus is definitely kind of overwhelming in comparison to the rest of it. Don't get me wrong, it's still for the most part an almondy fragrance, and I think it's lovely at that, but you're almost getting a half masculine version of this scent, because if you are familiar with Hypnotic Poison, you would know that leans feminine because it's an advertised feminine scent. So I guess I could really applaud Marly here for making, in my opinion, a more crowd-pleasing and more masculine unisex version of the initial DNA. I still personally prefer Hypnotic Poison because I've kind of grown up with that scent, but this one I do think is objectively better as far as what is used in it. So in that regard, since I think it is an improvement on the initial DNA, I think it's okay to give Pegasus a B tier. All right, moving on to the next fragrance by Parfum de Marly. Here we have Oajan, and this one has a strong resemblance to a fragrance by Hermes, one of my personal favorites, Ombre Narguilé. This one I feel like is super blatant as far as potentially ripping off that DNA, so don't fight me on this one. I feel like with what is supposed to smell like imitation tobacco within the Ombre Narguilé DNA, I feel like they kind of held back on it here in Oajan, but rather amped up the more sweeter syrupy accords. I feel like the cinnamon here is a little bit more prominent too, and I love cinnamon, so I have no problem with that. And I must say, this is one of my most complimented Marlies, and I think that's what it's all about when it comes to this brand. So with that being said, I can't say much else about Oajan. I think it deserves an A tier. The next Parfum de Marly is Nishane, and for Nishane, I have to give Parfum de Marly a lot of credit here because it is more original than some of the DNAs that I've already mentioned. While it's not completely a crowd pleaser, I think it is a unique take on cedar and patchouli, and I think most people won't hate it if they catch a whiff of you with this stuff. It's just hard for me to kind of dive into this one as far as making it remotely bottle worthy. So Nishane's alright. I'm going to give Nishane a C tier. Now moving on, we're getting into the bread and butter of Parfum de Marly, starting with Lune Exclusive. And what is this stuff really? It's kind of like the Leighton DNA, obviously, but going ham with the guaiac wood. I personally love guaiac wood. I think it's a really comforting, soft, woody scent. There's also some animalic facets here, so you best believe overall this stuff feels a lot less designery than some people would argue Leighton is a lot like. But then at the same time, it doesn't feel as crowd-pleasing, which I think is part of, again, Marly's appeal. But if you're ever to do a flanker for Parfum de Marly, I think this is a great first one here, and I personally own this, so of course I believe that. So you know what, shout outs to Lune Exclusive. I think it deserves an A tier. So moving on to Leighton now, and again with this fragrance right here, what is Parfum de Marly all about? Designers on drugs, essentially. So we're talking apple, bergamot, vanilla, fairly crowd-pleasing notes done in a fairly crowd-pleasing way that you can pretty much reach for altogether for every one of your seasons. Say if you are dealing with winter, spring, summer, and autumn like we are here in North America. You can use this for a night out. You can use it for more of a daytime offering if you choose to go a little bit more subdued with your sprays. It is one of the true signature scents of the brand, and on top of that, it's my most complimented from them too. So with that being said, I have to give Leighton an S tier. And now moving away from the bread and butter of the brand, here we have Kuhuion. And Kuhuion itself is one of the lesser known Parfum de Marly's. This one is a little bit more animalic. So it's an animalic leather with a little bit of sweetness in the tonka bean. You also have heliotrope too, which is like a vanilla-like floral. And I personally think it's nice to even out some of those animalic nuances with it. But at the same time, I feel like the scent is kind of confused too as a result. So I do appreciate the effort here, but part of me would just rather have a straightforward leather scent. I know Parfum de Marly has a couple of those that I'm about to mention in the near future. And I guess for an experimental scent, for having it for the sake of it, I guess is noble. It's just, I don't think it smells completely great either. And since I can't see this stuff with much compliment factor, I must give Kuhuion an E tier. Next up we have Kalan, and this one is widely talked about as of the last 10-11 months. And I must say for him, I think if this stuff was in a standard black Parfum de Marly presentation and not a red bottle, I honestly feel like a lot less people would be talking about it. Like, I'm dead ass wearing this stuff right now, and I'm just not remotely feeling this. This is not it whatsoever. So here you have an awkward concoction of blood orange, black pepper, moss, woods, and yes, it will get compliments from just beyond an arm's length. And I guess it could smell kind of pleasant in the air as far as this soft mossiness that kind of hits you with a little bit of spice. But I feel like the closer you come to it, I just think the worse it gets. Like, if you put your nose up to this stuff, I feel like it kind of comes off as slightly astringent. I'm personally really picky about black pepper too, and I think that it emitting off of me in the sun or any kind of heat, for example, is just going to be a little bit too much for my personal scent cloud. And legit, I almost hate the scent off of me just because I think that it is a little too much. But since the compliment factor is definitely here, I can't give this stuff a complete fail. I think Kalan deserves a D tier as a result. Alright, moving on to something that I feel like is much more like it. Here we have Herod. Again, Marly doesn't have to reinvent the wheel when they can just slightly make a redesign. So here we're talking about those vanilla tobacco scents that have been made famous in stuff like Tobacco Vanille by Tom Ford, for example. But here it's a lot more playful and crowd pleasing in a way that I feel like youths could reach for a DNA like this. In fact, I feel like this scent could be reached for by anyone if you have a more jovial personality. Like Tobacco Vanille to me is more of a smart casual and or autumn winter time suit scent. I still think it's stupid versatile, say if you are middle age or higher, or if there's certain maturity to you. But again, I do like how jovial Harrod is in comparison. Like Tobacco Vanille has an edge to its tobacco, like it can clearly come from a pipe, if that makes any sense. This one is like more eased in with the vanilla and cinnamon, if you ask me. And barring Leighton, it is definitely my most complimented scent from this brand. So you know what? Harrod gets an S tier. Now moving on to Hamdani, and this one is a really unique fragrance, to say the least. Again, typically I love guaiac wood. It's a soft, cozy, balsamic wood that I think is not used enough properly in fragrances altogether. But here it's too weirdly spiced off my skin, and I think it leans animalic AF in a way that I just can't remotely do. On top of that, I just don't feel like it's a crowd pleaser as well. So you know what? We're going to give Hamdani our first F tier. Not trying to remotely dunk on that scent, it's just not remotely for me or anyone I know. But yeah, moving on, here we have Habdon, and this is more like it, And honestly, I want to like this one as much of the cult following of Habdon lovers do love this one. I know there's some of you out there who are like, oh my gosh, Habdon, it's better than Oajan, it's better than Harrod, blah, blah, blah. And I think y'all are cute, you know, I respect your enthusiasm for this scent. And I think some of y'all have a chip on your shoulder for the right reasons, because it's definitely a more original scent, so I have to give it points for that. That being said, its concoction of apple, saffron, amber, among other notes, just doesn't feel as comforting off my skin. It doesn't put a smile on my face as much as the aforementioned scents. Doesn't feel as crowd pleasing as well, but again, to someone who might want a little bit of the best of both worlds with something that is still somewhat crowd pleasing but not completely, and still something original, I guess that's why you'd like a scent like this. But it's not completely for me, yet I still respect it enough to give it a B tier. Shoutouts to all the Habdon fans. Next up, I have Greenley on this list, but I'm actually not going to rank this stuff because I've yet to personally smell it. But if any of you guys have smelled this fragrance, please let me know what you think of it in the comment section below. And also be sure to tell me which Greenley name is your favorite. Is it Greenley? Is it the previously named Epsom, which I think a lot of people disliked? Or perhaps you like Sutton until something happened to that in a weird way, which I'm not going to really discuss. And yeah, again, I'm not really going to discuss the scent because I've yet to smell it. But yeah, give this video a thumbs up as well if you're also excited for Greenley. Anyway, we might as well move on to Godolphin, and it's a scent that I just want to call Gold Dolphin for obvious reasons. That being said, it doesn't smell like anything golden as far as like maybe a honey or anything like that. Unless you think leather smells like gold, then hey, that's what this stuff smells like, specifically Tuscan leather. No doubt about it, this is a Tuscan leather dupe, styled in a way that's a little bit more playful for the Parfum de Marly consumer. Like, I think it smells a little less mature, which I think is actually a good thing, again, for the Parfum de Marly consumer. But admittedly, the saffron here I feel like is a little bit more noticeable as far as an edge to it. I feel like it kind of pops in your nose. And since I'm also taking into consideration how I feel about this stuff, I am going to say that I prefer Tuscan leather because I feel like it's a little bit more smooth and as a result feels more luxurious off my skin. But what can I say? Godolphin overall is a nice crowd pleasing Tuscan leather pretender. I don't hate it. I don't think it's worse than a lot of the things here. So you know what? Godolphin gets a B tier. Next up, we have another maybe pretender-ish fragrance here in Galloway. If you don't already know, Galloway smells a lot like White by Lalique, if you know that scent. I'm personally a fan of that scent. It's one of the black peppers I can actually tolerate at the price that you can actually get it for. So there you have black pepper, you have Petitgrand among other notes. But here, what I like about Galloway over the White is that it leans more floral, which I'm personally going to prefer, with a heavier dose of the orange blossom used here, as well as the iris, and then it's also less spicy. And if you can limit the black pepper used in a fresh, spicy, floral / aquatic fragrance, then I'm going to be all for that. I don't know, sometimes I feel like black pepper just cheapens the fragrance more often than not. And overall, I just think that this stuff is an improvement on the initial Lalique DNA. So altogether, I must say that as far as a fresher leading Parfum de Marly DNA fragrance, this one is the one I will be closest to being wowed per se, in comparison to the other ones that we've already spoke of. So I personally think that Galloway deserves a B tier as well. Now moving on, we have yet another pretender. Here we go with Darley. This stuff feels eerily inspired by something like maybe Lamau with its fresher aromatic approach. But at the same time, some people would argue that the sweets here would also be reminiscent of stuff like Montblanc's Individuel and or Yop Homme, maybe Creed's Original Santal, stuff like that. That being said, I feel like that DNA is a little too antiquated to try to make work again in a more playful, newer, new-ish version. It's not like I think that this stuff smells bad, but I also don't think that's remotely worth the asking price in comparison to maybe vintage versions of some of the aforementioned fragrances that it is kind of styled from. It would still be a higher quality version of those, but altogether I guess I'm just completely over this DNA and I don't think it should have been reimagined. That being said, I still can see this getting compliments, so you know what, can't completely shat on this stuff either. Darley also gets a D tier. Next up we have Carlisle, the Isle of Karl. And I must say about Carlisle that I'm really happy about this no longer being a Harrods exclusive and now being a GR, or rather general release, because I think it's good for the Parfum de Marly consumer to get something that's also crowd pleasing and a little bit more original than what they're used to, as far as again the Laytons, as far as the Harrods. But admittedly the patchouli here is a little bit too green and piercing off of my skin as far as me getting a whiff of it myself. Like, I personally am not completely in love with the scent cloud, although I'm sure everyone else is. As a matter of fact, I have a really good friend who kind of lives here locally and I compliment him daily whenever he does wear Carlisle. I think it's also because I'm getting more of the warm spiciness from the cardamom whenever I get a whiff of that scent cloud. But I guess since my experience with it and the patch being a little bit too rampant off my skin, that's why I kind of feel not as endearing towards it. But I also feel like I'm being a little bit too nitpicky here. I think it's, again, a really lovely scent, and again, it will get compliments. So guess what? Carlisle also gets an A tier. Next up for Parfum de Marly, here we have Byerley. And I guess every brand needs to have that token vetiver scent, and Byerley is it for Parfum de Marly. And while this stuff is backed up with typically welcome notes from me, as far as the guaiac wood and some warm spices, stuff like cardamom and whatnot, for whatever reason, I just feel like this stuff is not as flattering to me as some of the landmark vetivers out there. The Terre de Mezes, the Grey vetivers, the Carvon vetivers, the Guerlain vetivers, as well as other alternative takes on vetiver on a higher-ish level. So stuff like even Sultan vetiver by Nishane, I would prefer over something like this. But this scent, I really have to give Parfum de Marly a lot of props for trying to make work, just because it's so easy for a vetiver to kind of smell like any of the aforementioned vetivers, barring Sultan vetiver that I did mention there. This stuff is just not as flattering as I'd want it to be, unfortunately. But still a good effort, A for effort, but it will get a C on this tier list. And last but not least, here we have a caster. I guess every niche brand needs a rose oud combo 2 token, and I must say I like how insanely rosy this stuff is, which I guess Parfum de Marly ain't known for as far as the men's / unisex side of things. And somehow they made this also come off as more masculine and or unisex, so I think that is also pretty good effort on their part. But I must say that the oud here kind of leans barnyard-ish off of my skin in comparison to other ouds out there. And honestly, typically I don't like this genre, so stuff like Oud Palau by Detic or stuff like Oud Espahan by Christian Dior, typically not a fan of those scents, and I'm not sure if this stuff is better than those fragrances either. But again, I appreciate the effort, so I think a caster also gets a D tier. And holy crap, what a tier list, look at that. Alright forum, before we conclude this video, I, Manny from the not so distant past and or future, has something to say on behalf of our beloved sponsor for today, and that is Exter. Exter makes these really premium wallets that will definitely set you apart from the rest of the pack when it comes to coolness. And while there are other quick access RFID blocking wallets out there, I think this one with this kind of motion that you just push is the slickest I've ever personally used. Of course, you have a nice minimalist design here that I can't also get enough of. You just have all the essentials here, so nowadays you're not carrying that much cash and the world is largely going into a more digital direction, so why not go with something like this? But the real star of the show is this guy right here behind the wallet. This is your Exter Chipolo tracker card, and I think this thing is quite awesome. You kind of just slide it in back there, and then you sync it to the Chipolo app on your iPhone and or Android. And from here, in case you misplace your wallet, you can actually find out where it is. So let me show you. So on the app, I can physically click on Ring to Find. And there you go. So wherever this is at, wherever you might have left it locally and or wherever, you'll always have access to it via the app, ensuring that you'll never lose the location of this wallet unless someone actually takes the tracker card out. But this thing works both ways too, because I don't know about you guys, but whenever I'm working at home, I always seem to misplace my actual phone. And now I can use this right here in the tracker card's buzzer to actually find my phone locally if it's just nearby. So also check this out now. I'm going to double click the tracker card. Come on, that's pretty cool, isn't it? I have to give a big shout out to them for sponsoring this video. So what I'm saying is, if you guys want, also support my sponsors because they're able to support this as far as furthermore financially. And just so you know, that love is furthermore reciprocated from our end. You'll get a discount on any of these great extra wallets using my affiliate link in the description below. It's only a summer seasonal automatic code applying, so please do not sleep. So it's specifically the Parliament wallet by Exer for the win. Now I must say, in closing, I feel kind of bad relegating Parfum de Marly to liking the most crowd-pleasing ones like seemingly everyone else does. But I also think that their more adventurous offerings aren't as flattering, for me at least, in comparison to maybe Guerlain's out there or Frederic Maule's, stuff like that. It just is what it is, and I'd say since the release of Leighton back in 2016, they've had their foot on the gas pedal as far as just creating more long-lasting, crowd-pleasing fragrances that not a whole lot of people are going to hate, as far as the people who are actively checking for Parfum de Marly. And while that might not be my personal steez, I would also say that I do respect this approach a lot. Not everyone has to be a brand that is quote unquote respected on an artistic level, nor does anyone or everyone want to be that. Parfum de Marly has accepted the role of being those guys who are willing to ingratiate designer consumers into the niche world with simply what they are kind of used to, just on a higher level. And at the end of the day, perfume is a business too. Money talks, bullshit walks, whether you like it or not. So big salute to Parfum de Marly. I'm not exactly a stan of your brand, but I will continue to watch from afar. But what about you guys? I'd like to know what you also think of the brand Parfum de Marly. Do you like them, love them, hate them? What would you rate them? And let me know what other brands I should cover in a tier list format. All of that in the comment section below, pretty please. As always, like the video as well to let me know that you appreciate content like this, and subscribe and hit that notification bell if you've yet to ensure that you'll be among the first to be able to watch content like this too. And until next time, thanks again for watching. Take care for now. Peace out. Bye. Wear your fragrances.